All right, so today we're going to be looking into something a little different.
Yeah.
You always get to the heart of complex topics here. But what if the topic itself is about, like, using words to be intentionally provocative?
That's a really interesting question, and it's kind of what we're going to be diving into today. We're exploring Die Kunst mit Worten zu beherrschen, der Poetry Master, which translates to the art of mastering words, the Poetry Master, a source that really digs into using language like a weapon, especially in slam poetry.
Okay, so words that, like, hit hard, make you think, and maybe even sting a bit. The source talks about making words sharp as a razor, which, I mean, that sounds pretty intense.
It is. The idea is that, like, in this world that's, just packed with information, language that's bland, it just gets lost.
Huh.
To really grab attention, your words need precision and you have to mean it. They need to cut through all the noise and make an impact.
So it's not just about being, like, eloquent. It's about being intentionally provocative. I mean, that's kind of the point of slam poetry, right? To shake things up and challenge what we think is normal and maybe even make people a little uncomfortable.
Exactly. The source argues that sometimes you need to use dark humor, that unexpected twist that can bring out strong emotions and force the audience to confront uncomfortable truths.
And that's connected to that whole words as weapons idea, right?
Mhm.
Because a well-placed barb or a cleverly crafted insult can be just as effective as, like, a physical blow when it comes to getting a reaction.
Precisely. But it's not just about being shocking for the sake of it. The source really emphasizes how important it is to use this kind of language strategically, to highlight hypocrisy and expose injustice, or simply make people think about a topic in a new way.
So it's about wielding these weapons responsibly, I guess, not
Yeah.
just like throwing verbal grenades around.
Right. And that leads us to another really important thing the source highlights: the power of repetition and refinement in really honing your message.
This is where I'm a little lost, to be honest. How does repetition come into play when we're talking about being provocative or using words like weapons? Wouldn't that get old after a while?
It's not about repeating the same words over and over again without thinking. The source describes the slam poetry text as being alive, meaning each performance is a chance to kind of tweak the delivery, experiment with pauses and eye contact, and even silence.
So it's like you're always sharpening that blade, making sure it hits the target every single time.
Exactly. The source talks about how a slam poem actually evolves with every performance, and it becomes more impactful as the poet refines their delivery and connects with the audience more deeply.
That makes sense. It's kind of like a comedian working on a new joke, right?
Yeah.
They might start with a basic idea, but it's through repeating those performances, observing the audience's reaction, that they fine-tune the timing and delivery and even the words themselves to really nail the joke.
That's a great analogy, and it highlights how important it is to not just create powerful language, but also master the art of delivering it.
So it's not enough to just have those sharp words. You need to know how to wield them effectively. Like a skilled swordsman practicing their moves over and over until they become second nature.
Precisely. And speaking of skillful execution, the source introduces another interesting idea: the power of subverting expectations. It talks about shattering the audience's expectations with one brutal strike, and I think that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm listening. But how does this brutal strike connect to everything we've been talking about? The sharp words and honing it and all that.
Well, think of it this way. When you set up an expectation and then just totally go against it, you create a moment of surprise, a jolt that can make your message really hit home.
So like a plot twist in a movie.
Yeah.
You think the story's going one way, and then bam, something totally unexpected happens and it changes everything.
Exactly. And when it comes to slam poetry, this could be anything from, like, a sudden change in tone or pace to a shocking image or even a well-placed silence. It's about shaking up the audience's comfort zone and making them pay attention.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all comes together. You've got the sharp words and the honed delivery, and then this element of surprise that really drives the point home. But let's get practical for a second. How can someone actually use this subverting expectations thing in real life? It's not like we're all going to become slam poets.
True, but the idea applies to any kind of communication. Take a presentation, for example. You could start by presenting a commonly held belief, and then just break it down with facts and logic, ending with a surprising conclusion that challenges what the audience thought at the beginning.
So being a bit of a contrarian, shaking things up to make people think differently.
In a way, yes. But it's also about being creative and strategic with how you communicate. The source gives an example of a slam poet who uses humor to talk about a serious topic. It catches the audience off guard and makes them more open to a message they might have ignored otherwise.
That makes sense. It's like using humor as a way to sneak in a serious point. People let their guard down when they're laughing, and then, bam, you hit them with something that makes them think.
Exactly. And the great thing is this approach can be used anywhere. Whether you're writing an email or giving a speech or even just having a conversation, you can use that element of surprise to make what you're saying more memorable and have a bigger impact.
Now, the source also talks about the Poetry Master, this book that claims to teach you all these techniques. But is it just for slam poets, or could anyone benefit from these ideas?
That's a great question, and I think it gets to the heart of what we've been talking about. The book uses slam poetry as its base, but the principles it lays out are universal.
So it's not just about writing poetry, it's about being a better communicator in general.
Exactly. The book digs into the psychology of persuasion, the art of storytelling, and how important it is to connect with your audience emotionally.
So whether you're trying to win over a client or inspire your team or even just have a meaningful conversation with a friend, these principles can help you get your message across better.
That's right. And it all comes back to the idea that words have power. They can inform and inspire and persuade and even provoke, but it's up to us to learn how to use them in the right way.
We've been talking about using words like weapons, but I think it's important to remember that not everyone is okay with that kind of language. Some might find it too aggressive.
You're absolutely right. And the source knows that this approach isn't for everyone. It takes confidence and skill and being comfortable with pushing boundaries. But even if you don't fully embrace the words as weapons idea, I think there's still a lot to learn.
Like what?
Well, for one, it shows how important it is to be deliberate with the words we use. We often just throw words around without thinking about their impact.
So being more mindful of the words we choose, even in everyday conversations.
Exactly. The source encourages us to think about the emotions we want to create, the ideas we want to share, and what actions we want to inspire with our language.
I see. It's like the difference between just throwing a rock and actually aiming for a target.
Exactly. And even if you don't want to use your words as weapons, you can still use them as tools to build connections, understand each other better, and create positive change.
So it's about finding that balance between being provocative and being respectful. Being assertive, but also being empathetic.
Exactly. It's about using our words to build the kind of world we want to live in.
Okay, I can definitely get behind that. Now, before we move on, I want to go back to something you said about the book pushing this words as weapons approach. Did the source actually call it a game plan? That sounds kind of intense.
You're right. It's pretty strong language. The source describes the Poetry Master as a guide to mastering these techniques, almost like a rule book for using language to reach your goals.
So like a self-help book for people who want to be more persuasive and influential.
Kind of, but it's also about something deeper than just getting what you want.
Like what?
The source argues that mastering language isn't just about manipulating others, it's about finding your own voice, expressing what you believe in, and connecting with others in a real way.
So it's about using your words to actually make a difference, to have a positive impact.
Exactly. And that brings us right back to the main message of our deep dive today. Words are powerful. They can be used for good or bad, to build up or tear down. It's up to each of us to decide how we'll use them.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here with words as weapons, refining delivery, and subverting expectations. It's been a fascinating journey, but I have to admit, it feels a bit intimidating.
I can understand that. But I think the main takeaway is that mastering language, it's a process, you know? It's about constantly learning and trying new things and figuring out what works for you.
So no magic formula, nothing that fits everyone when it comes to being a master of words.
Well, not really. The source emphasizes that finding your own voice, that's really important. It's about understanding what you're good at, where you need to improve, and what makes your perspective unique.
Right, because you can learn all the techniques, but if you're not being true to yourself, it won't matter. Your words won't have that same impact.
Absolutely. Being authentic, that's key. People can tell when someone is genuine when they're speaking from the heart.
So it's not just about learning to use words like weapons, it's about using them to connect with people on a deeper level.
Exactly. It's about building relationships and understanding each other better and motivating people to take action.
Okay, that's a much more positive way to look at it. But I'm still thinking about this Poetry Master book. Is it really a practical guide to being better at communicating, or is it more focused on slam poetry?
I think it's a little bit of both. The source uses slam poetry as a way to explore these wider principles of communication, but there are definitely practical things anyone can use no matter what they do.
Like what?
Well, for example, the book talks about how important it is to tell stories, use vivid descriptions, and create a sense of rhythm and flow in your language.
So it's not just what you say, but how you say it.
Exactly. The source makes it clear that even the most powerful message can fall flat if you don't deliver it the right way.
It's like having the best sword, but not knowing how to use it. Won't do you much good.
That's a great way to put it. And the book gives you actual tips and exercises to help you get better at delivery, like mastering your tone of voice and pacing, and even using body language effectively.
So it's kind of like a self-help book for
Yeah,
people who want to be more confident and impactful communicators.
I guess you could say that, but it's also about more than just improving yourself.
What do you mean?
The source argues that mastering language isn't just about getting what you want, it's about using your voice to make the world a better place.
So using your words to inspire others and convince them and actually make a difference.
Exactly. And it all starts with understanding just how powerful language can be and making a commitment to using it in a responsible way.
That's a powerful message. And speaking of powerful messages, I think our source had one last thought for us, almost like a challenge.
You're talking about stay creative, Stefan, right?
Yeah. It's such a simple statement, but it sums up everything we've talked about, don't you think?
Yeah.
It reminds us that getting good with words is a never-ending journey, and we need to keep pushing ourselves and exploring new ways of expressing ourselves.
Absolutely. It reminds us that we all have the power to use words in a way that's both impactful and meaningful.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. What will your legacy be, written in the language you choose to use? It's a question worth pondering, isn't it? Stay creative, everyone.